I'm really excited because I got to, like I said, work this week on vacation for a sermon that I ended up finding out, and I'm going to be really honest with you guys this morning. Very late in the week, I found out what I was preaching on. No one's fault but my own, but working on things and trying to figure it out. And it was so ironic to be working way late into the night and working while on vacation to get here today and talk about the meaninglessness of work. I just was like, thanks, God. This feels great. I just really was glad for that. And so I'm curious, why do you work? Like, why do you work? You ever have a kid come up to you, or you've seen a kid come up to somebody and be like, what you doing? Right? Kids are curious. I love it about them. So they're like, what you doing? And then you tell them, and half the time they have no idea what you just said was. And then they'll ask the next question. Most often it's the question kids love to ask. Say it loudly. Why? So what you doing? And then you tell them, I'm working on blah, blah, blah. Why? And then you have this existential question on your hands. Why am I doing this? Why am I getting up early? Why am I doing this? Why am I working? There's a story probably made up of a woman who, she was working in the kitchen, and she was making food, and she was making food for a family dinner. And so she had the big ham, and she'd cut it down and put it into two different containers that were going to both go into the oven. And her daughter is there. It's like a multi-generational thing. Her daughter's there watching and asking, Mom, why do you cut that ham into that and put it in two different things and put it in the oven? And she says, well, listen, your grandma right here, because grandma's there, she would always do this. I watched her when I was your age, and she would cut it, and it makes it better to go ahead and cut it down to size and be able to have it in two different containers. It cooks and tastes better. And grandma speaks in. She's like, I'm sorry, I gotta jump in here and just tell you, that's not why I did it. It doesn't make it better. My oven was just so small, there was no room for the big container. So I had to cut it in order to go ahead and so we'd have enough food. I still need to make both of them, but that's how, and it was meaningless that she was then, ages later, when she has a bigger oven, it was meaningless that she was even cutting it and doing that. And that's a good picture, I think, of a lot of what it can sometimes feel like when it comes to work, is that we have to ask about the meaning of it. And speaking of meaning, work, of course, could mean different things for different ones of us, right? Yeah. I mean, come on. There's some of us, maybe our work is we're a government contractor. Some of us, it might be a stay-at-home parent. Some of us, it might be that we're in the healthcare industry, we're a healthcare professional. Maybe we're school staff at some degree. We could be in retail. We could be in delivery services, all my UPS people. And on and on and on and on and on and on. Like we all could do work differently. But basically, working definition for work. Yes? Working definition for work. It is taking your time and your energy and your unique gifts and then also your unique interests and combining them all together, along with opportunities that you have for work, right? Because I would love if somebody would pay me to just watch YouTube videos about gardening and then trying it and seeing if I fail and succeed. And if I could get paid to do that, y'all, I'd love it. But opportunities combined with your time, your energy, your unique talents that you have, and your unique interests that you have. This gets us to doing, because of those being different for each of us, right? It gets us to doing a variety of different kinds of work. So in this room, a lot of us do different things. And one of the fun things about this church, and one of the things I love about Midweek Meal, again, another plug for Midweek Meal, getting together. We sit around a large table, eat family style together. And did I mention it's free, by the way? Like, you're eating really good food on a Wednesday night for free with some really great people. But we'll ask questions, get to know each other. And one of the questions sometimes that we ask is like, okay, so what was your first job? And it's fun to find out what people's first jobs were. How many of them were slinging burgers, or how many of them were out, being the last person to clean up the work site because nobody else wanted to do it, get the new guy to do it, whatever it might be. It's interesting what people's first jobs were. But the first job of humanity was to work. So let me just real quickly, before we get into Ecclesiastes in just a minute, we're going to process this. I want us to know that one of the most originally human things that ever was for us to work. I think they've already got it up there. There you go. Genesis 2:15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And this is before Adam's sin. So this isn't going, okay, you ate that fruit that you weren't supposed to eat, so now you've got to work. Because I think that's what some of us sometimes think, is that work, I can't wait till we're in heaven and we don't have to work anymore. The problem is that before everything got messed up, work was a thing. Working it and keeping it. And I think some of us have a pretty bitter and frankly like beat up view of work. Because after the fall, it did get kind of like, cursed. And it got kind of messed up. And my hope is that maybe as we touch on work a couple times in this series, in the next couple weeks ahead, I'm hoping that we're going to redeem the view of work for some of us so that it can actually have the right view that God has of it. I at least hope that some of us will have a more elevated view of work than we currently have. Because there are some important things that we need to learn regarding work and important questions that we need to ask. So, if you weren't here last week, it's all online as far as you can go back and watch it, but I can't repreach it. I just don't have the time. So to catch you up real quickly, basically Ecclesiastes 1 starts off with the preacher saying, hey, I'm the preacher, and here's a sermon. You're expecting a preacher to preach. Yeah, that's what they do, generally. So the preacher's going to preach, and he comes up, and it's not the sermon you thought it was going to be. And so if he's going to be talking about work today, you can imagine he's going to tell us some things that, aren't going to be cheery. On this rainy day, we got another rainy Sunday in this series. I'm praying for all weeks to be like that. Okay, Ecclesiastes 3:9. He asked the question, because again, we're asking good questions. What gain has the worker from his toil? And we said last week that when the author here is talking about workers, he has in mind, you're going to see in this series, he's going to be talking about people who are in the king's court. So these are government workers. And then he also has farmers in mind, because he tells them how to sow their seed. So he's got the full breadth of like what work can mean for us. And he's asking the question, and it's a good question to ask. So what does the worker, and again, all of us do some kind of work generally or meant to, we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, work in some degree. So what does the worker gain from their toil? Okay, well, let's see. At this point in history, humanity has worked hard and have made like incredibly impressive pyramids and beautiful ornate temples, like wonders of the world, yeah? Humanity has gotten language, and in many cases, or at least some cases, written it down. They have written language. They've built up civilization. They have aqueducts, and they have like all kinds of cool constructed things. The wheel, come on now. We came up with the wheel by this point. What have we gained? Come on, I'm getting some ideas here. And we've created the arts in many ways. There are arts and stories that exist already at this point in history that will transcend time. We'll still want to talk about them, look at them, gaze at them, wonder at them, and so much more. One might wonder what Solomon, that's who I think, by the way, wrote Ecclesiastes. But one might wonder what Solomon is thinking of when he asks about this question. Is he thinking about these wonders of the world and all they've accomplished? No, he's not. Because he's looking not at like the wonders of what we have created. He said, what does the worker gain for their, no, go back. Yeah. What does the worker gain from his toil? And so he's kind of looking and going, okay, what's that little, worker ant? What have you accomplished for going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth? He's looking kind of at that bird's eye view down and going, so what have you done with your life? What have you accomplished? It's a pretty existentialistic question, yeah? Like, okay, you moved a lot of dirt around. What'd you accomplish, kind of thing. And if you were here last week, or again, if you've ever simply read Ecclesiastes, you can imagine it's not going to necessarily, you know where it's heading, yeah? Okay, let's start off at the very beginning of Ecclesiastes. Verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, vapor of vapors, meaningless, depending on your translation. It's a hard word to translate, but basically pointlessness of pointlessness. Vapor of vapors, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? There's that similar question again. So he asked it in chapter 3, and we went back, and he's asking it again. And now let's listen in closely, because he's going to give us a variety of poetic explanations for why work is so meaningless, or at least it can be so meaningless. And in the journey towards a meaningful life, which is what we all want, yes? In the journey of working towards a meaningful life and the wisdom to know how to get there and how to operate there, we need to first let the preacher tell us what it looks like to have work and toil be so meaningless. Right? If we want meaningful life, we want to know what makes work and toil meaningless so that we don't do that. Okay? So verse 4, here we go. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever, which we'll kind of touch on in just a second. But the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuit the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Again, he's being poetic. You catch that? But he's basically saying one of the reasons why work is so meaningless, and this is our first point, note takers, is because it's never ending. It just doesn't end. And again, some of us are very aware of that. Hyper aware. It never ends. Because you just went ahead and you finish it up. You put a bow on it. And then you look over here and then you go, oh, there's more work. And then you go, okay, let me at least, oh, wait, now that's got to be done again, right? That's just how it is. He talks about water and how the ocean, like, we've had floods recently. I was on vacation this week, came back, and had to wonder if the church building was flooded again, because we've had issues before. Praise report. No flooding at the church building this week. But we had good reason for it to have done that, right? Yeah. My gosh, Rappahannock is just really high. It's just disgusting. We've gotten a lot of rain. And you know what I've heard? The ocean did not go, hold on a second. That's a lot of rain for you to then get into the ocean. The ocean doesn't ever look at the rivers and the streams upstream from it and go, that's enough. No more. I can't take any more. The ocean willingly accepts every bit of rain and every bit of droplets that come into it. That's what he's talking about there, yeah? Yeah, it continues to take it in. And that's a good picture of work. Work never goes, oh, no, wait, there's no more work to be done. I can't take any more. Work, I mean, the Greeks got into this with Sisyphus. Yeah, Sisyphus, the guy who was cursed by the gods to go ahead and have that big boulder that you've seen the pictures of, where he has to roll it up the hill, and he rolls it almost to the top, and then as fate would tell, as the story goes, then the rock comes rolling back down, and then he gets to go, okay, well, that's enough for today. No, his lot in life is to go back down and roll it back up. The picture of what work feels like for some of us, because it's never ending. It is a never-ending thing to understand. My wife and I, we have this, I'm going to tell, I want to air some of our junk. She's been saying, I can't wait till we're caught up. And I'm just telling you guys, you just don't get caught up. I'm pretty sure when I get caught up, some of you are going to be standing around at that moment. And you'll be saying nice things about what I was as a person. That's going to be the moment where I'm caught up. I can't do any more. It's all done now. Because that's the point in which the work does end, because you're dead. But until that point, there's always work to be done. It is never ending. And quite frankly, the preacher is kind enough to go, that is why work feels meaningless sometimes. Because you get to that point where you're honest with yourself. And you go, well, I thought I was done, but then I looked back at it and there's more work to do. So that's one reason. And then in verse 9, he continues and gives us another one. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. And, oh man, I'm realizing now that Eric, I didn't give you this image. But here's the reason why that this is meaningless, and then I'll just have to tell you why it's meaningless in a second here. It's not as novel as you imagine it is. That's another reason why it's meaningless. The work that you do is not as novel. See, here's what I forgot to send Eric. There was a book that I wrote. In case you didn't know, I wrote a book. Yeah. Don't worry. The royalties are enough to pay for 1 gallon of gas, I think, at this point right now. That's what I've totaled up. That's what I've gotten so far since like a decade ago. But I wrote a small book, basically. As a youth pastor at that point, I wanted a devotional for youth, young adults to have that would walk them through what they should do when they first commit themselves to Christ. It would explain things like why we pray, why we read the Bible, what the gospel message is, what is the importance of gathering together with other believers in this thing called the church. And so, actually, Amber, since you're right there, would you mind grabbing one of those books off the bookshelf right there? Because at least I have that handy. But I wrote this book because I had wanted it, and I had looked, and I had looked, and I had looked, and I could not find something that was extensive enough to get into some of the, just beyond the gospel, and then getting into actually like the Christian life. And I couldn't find anything that was devotional, so it's small chapters, and would be easy to do like that. And I wrote a book, and I think she's, yep. Yep. Is it coming? Because I can just keep on. Hey, Amber? Okay. It takes two. Because two are better than one. That sounds familiar, right? Ecclesiastes, chapter 4. We're not there yet, guys. Anyway, it all starts here. Proceeds go to my child. No, I'm just kidding. We give this away free. If you want it, you can have it. They're back in the bookshelf. They're easy to find. Anyway, it all starts here. And I wanted you to see this because, again, I didn't send him the image, but I have a picture on my phone. I had finished going through the process of writing it, editing it, getting it to be self-published, and having it finally in my hand. Really cool moment. Like, I worked hard. Yeah? Like, this did not exist. My youngest brother at the time works at a Christian bookstore. And he messages me, and he goes, "You'll never believe." And he sends me a picture. I have it on my phone, and it is a picture of a book that is called Start Here. Mine's It All Starts Here. But Start Here. And the graphic on the front cover of that book, which, by the way, is a book that is written for new believers to help them walk through what it looks like to begin following Jesus. It's in the Christian bookstore already. Mine is not. Theirs is. The book has literally the Google Map kind of like drop thing. The little, the very familiar looking one. Yeah, different colors. But like they literally use the same, and there's no copyright infringement. They didn't know this book existed. And I didn't know their book existed. There's nothing new under the sun. I had worked hard to create something novel, something new, something that did not exist before, only to find out, yes, it did. Yes, it did. And that's why work is meaningless sometimes. Because you work and work and work, and you're going, I'm doing something fresh, something that's never been seen before. And then you eventually find out that actually it's not as new as you thought it was. It's not as novel as you thought it was. It's kind of, if you wanted it to be meaningful because nobody had done it before, God will sometimes remind you or reveal to you that it's not that novel. Well, verse 11, he continues, "There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven, and it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I've seen everything that's done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind." So he's kind of concluding it there, but back in verse 11, he said that like everything kind of comes and goes, like that, and it's not remembered. The former things are not remembered. And so here's our third thing that he's telling us is why work is meaningless, because it's not as enduring as you'd want it to be. Yeah? It's not as enduring as you'd want it to be. I mean, really, again, I'm really encouraging you this morning. You're welcome. But like, how many of y'all have done work in your life that really felt like you were back into your childhood at the beach? You just built the sandcastle, only to have the wave come in and crash it down. You've all done it. You've all done work where you were like, oh, that. I mean, we were watching a movie the other day, and it was a war movie, and I was just thinking as I'm watching that, going, how many wars have taken things that people worked so hard for, and in just seconds, just gone? Hours and years of people's lives, and the work was just not enduring. I mean, to find a house in our area that was built in the 1700s is kind of a big deal. Back in the 1700s, there were more of them. How many novels have been written that nobody's reading? Like, how much work has been done back hundreds of years ago that none of us care one lick about? Meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Don't wait, there's more. All right, chapter 2. He goes back into the topic of work and toil in verse 18. And he says, "I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or an idiot. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This is also," and you would agree with him, "vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must then leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This is also a vanity." So even in the night, he's working hard, only to go ahead and at some point die or job change or whatever it might be, and somebody else takes it over. And all that you worked for, as he says, could either be handed to somebody who's going to be an absolute idiot with it or maybe good. You don't know. Or they might just go and look at it and go, well, that's just dumb. We don't need that. And throw it out. Yeah? That project you spent hours and hours and hours working on, they're going to look at it and go, that's not how I would do it. And they're going to throw it out. Another reason the author here gives us for why work is meaningless is everything you work for will eventually be under the control of someone else who may not care for it like you do. It's a reality of life, isn't it? Yeah. They may not care for it like you do. And he recognizes, boy, that feels really meaningless then, to get up and spend hours and hours and hours and strive and work for that when that's the case. And then in chapter 5, he keeps going. There is a grievous evil that I've seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. So a bad investment happened. So all that work that was gone into, all of a sudden you bet on the wrong horse. You put your eggs in the wrong basket, whatever it might be. And also, don't worry, he's the father of a son who he's responsible for. But he has nothing in his hand. And as he came now from his mother's womb, he's going to go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and much vexation and sickness and anger. And again, just kind of highlighting, he's worked hard. He's driven himself crazy. It really kind of gets to let's get to the point. All it takes is some bad luck to lose all you broke your back working for. Right? All it takes is just unfortunate events to all of a sudden, all that you worked for is gone. I remember we're going to have real church this morning, yeah? I remember we bought our house a couple years ago, and I was talking with somebody about it early on. It's like it was a big investment for us. It was a God thing. It's a whole other story. But Madeline and I were talking about it, and we were like, the good thing is, though, because at that point, the housing market was in flux, because, it usually is. It's in flux, and the question was, is the bubble going to burst? Like, house prices keep going up, and I kept on thinking, and I said it out loud, guys. You ready for I'm the reason it happened. You're going to find out. I'm the reason it happened. I said, we live in the D.C. area. The government will never go ahead and downsize itself, allowing houses to become less desired in this area. We are in the area where the housing market cannot go down. It just logically cannot, unless 2025 happens. In which case the government, anyway. But it's funny because all it takes is for some bad luck or something you didn't expect to happen, something that could never happen that can absolutely happen, to all of a sudden take your work and just make it meaningless. The naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will return. Job admitted that in his book. He says, Job 121, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But sometimes when we get made naked by the events of our lives, it doesn't feel so much like praise the Lord. It feels like, I just got stripped of everything that I had been working for. Meaningless. We are almost done with all of the many reasons that Solomon gives us for why your work can absolutely be entirely meaningless. So you got room for one more? Yep. We're almost done with it. And then it changes a little bit here, okay? I warned you today wasn't going to be the most uplifting one. But anyway, because chapter 4, verse 4, he says that he saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is a vanity and a striving after the wind. So another reason why work is meaningless is because much of the motivation for it comes from the corrupted drive of competition. It's not even that we get up, again, he uses hyperbole, but it's not even like we're getting up going, you know what, I just want to work hard for the sake of doing good work. It's actually a lot more often that we're like, I want to be a better stay-at-home mom than she is. I want to create a better widget than they did. I'm going to work hard because I'm not going to be like my dad. I really hate that person I work with is constantly outperforming me and making me look stupid. They better watch out because I'm going to make them look stupid. Cain and Abel, one of the first stories of brothers in the Bible, worked hard. One of them worked out in the field and killed something. One of them worked in the field and harvested something. And then God goes, I accept this sacrifice. I don't accept that one. And all of a sudden you have sibling rivalry because there was competition over the work that they did. Right off the bat. And so one of the reasons that work doesn't get to satisfy is because in this world is because there's always someone that you're either trying to beat or that you are currently beating that you need to make sure you keep on beating, or that you're afraid of them eventually beating you, and now you're extra motivated now that they're going to take your spot as king of the hill. So you got to keep up with the Joneses and do better than the next guy, and that is absolutely meaningless. And so we get to a point where we go, okay, enough. Yeah, enough. I'm going to give up. I get it. There's so many reasons why the work that we could do would be meaningless. I give up. I'm going to grab the pina coladas. I'm going to go ahead and grab the hammocks, and I'm going to kick up your feet, quit the rat race, or any kind of race. Quit running at all. Let's just go ahead and enjoy the nice life of sitting back and folding our hands and enjoying whatever happens. Forget work. Everyone, we're going on vacation. We're all retiring. Work be darned. That's what he said, basically, right? That's where this is going. Well, verse 4 of chapter 4 goes into verse 5 of chapter 4, where he says, the fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. So we got one more reason for why work is meaningless, and it's actually that if you don't work, no drive to work equals destruction. It's kind of like the work can be meaningless. Okay, well then I'm going to not do that. And he's like, well, that's actually worse. Because you don't work, you don't have the resources you need in order to take care of yourself and to take care of others. You end up eating your own flesh. You end up eating up your own resources, and then you get to a point of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So he kind of is honest with you, and he goes, well, listen, the no work thing isn't an option either. And so some people get so motivated by that, they go to the opposite side. They're like, okay, verse 7 through 8. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, he says. I saw a person who has no other, no son or brother, yet, like no one to pass it on to. And yet there's no end to his toil. His eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? Instead, they just keep on working and working and working and working. And he's like, why are you working like that? Work, 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 but they're never taking the time to stop and ask, like, what on earth are you working so darn hard for? And he says that's unhappy business, working that way. So it begs the question that I started off with, why on earth do we work? Like, why on earth, under the sun, do you work here on earth? What are you working for? Because the preacher of Ecclesiastes is continuing, as we see today, his encouraging sermon series about all the things that we can do with our lives that don't mean a hill of beans. And he's talking about these things that we think we can grab a hold of, and if we can just grab a hold of them, they will make our life meaningful. And then he keeps on saying the problem is you grab a hold of them and they're just fog. They're mist. You could see them and you're like, oh, I'm going to grab a hold of this. If I can just find meaningful work, then my life will be meaningful. Right? And he goes, see, that's the thing. It doesn't work. And he gave us all of those reasons for why it doesn't work. And I think work is one of the first things that Ecclesiastes touches on because it's one of the most common candidates for us to go ahead and say, that's how I'm going to make a meaningful life. Because think about this. Our questions indicate our values. The questions we ask of ourselves and others indicate what matters to us a lot. Yeah? And what is one of the most common questions that we tend to ask somebody when we're first meeting them and getting to know them? You guys know it's one of the questions we naturally, what do you do? So what do you do? So what do you? Can you imagine? I just was thinking about this as I was writing this week. I was like, can you imagine if you didn't understand why they were asking? So what do you do? Well, I do the occasional crossword puzzle. I've been known to say long story short, but it's actually going to be a long story long. I do that. I do my hair in the morning. I wouldn't say that, obviously, but you might answer, I do my hair most mornings. I walk upstairs and avoid elevators because I had this one experience as a kid, and they start telling you the long story long. No. You and I know what is meant by what do you do. We mean, of course, this nebulous work world. What are you doing with your life? What is the meaning? What do you do that is one of the biggest pieces of who you are? It's kind of what we're getting at. I mean, that's why we'd ask it. The one that you pour yourself into, that kind of work, this that you hope to get something out of, right? You work so that you hope to get something out of it. For that very reason, the preacher's words, as we've been just looking at them, if we can be really honest in church today, can often offend us, they can sadden us, or they can anger us, or maybe a mixture. How dare he call what you work so hard on smoke and mirrors? How dare he call out what you have poured yourself into, a meaningless vapor? How terrible, how disheartening. But the question is, what do you do if that's true? Because if it is true, then we should question whether we how we pay attention to that truth. I mean, what we do in this world under the sun, if all the work that we do is never entirely complete, right? If it's conceived from this place of competition against some other people, if it's filled with frustration all the time, and if it's destined for obscurity after we're dead and gone anyway, and no one's going to remember it, then what is the point of it? Like, why are we going to do it? Do we just quit? Oh no, we already saw. We don't quit because we have to not eat ourselves. That didn't sound like a better route to go. It makes sense that Solomon would touch on this big topic of work so soon in his teaching. And there's a lot that can get messed up if we get this wrong. I mean, just think about this. Again, if you get work wrong, how much it messes up everything. Because how many of us have done a project, whether it's at school or if it's at work for something, and then you get to the point of delivery, and then they tell you, that, let's say it's school, the teacher tells you, that was the wrong chapter. Yes? Yep. Good. We all have a human experience of going, no. All the moment where it's like, oh, that wasn't what I meant. You delivered on that graphic design work, and that's not at all what I meant. We must have had a miscommunication. I need you to start over from scratch. Yeah, start over from scratch. That's not it. And you know what it's like then, because right, you get the goosebumps. You feel really good inside. You know, you're like, oh, I get to do more work. No, you know what it's like. You feel your gut just empty. You're like, oh my goodness, no. It's gutting. Imagine that being not just a particular project, but if work was like one of the biggest things you poured your life into, what made your life meaningful, imagine if you got to the end of your life and then you realize, oh no, I did the wrong thing. I did it wrong. What a sad life that would be. That's why the preacher lovingly and led by the Holy Spirit goes right after this beast of a topic. Solomon had worked hard, I believe, and he'd also seen a lot of people work hard, and he was getting to this point in his life. He looks and he goes, this can be futility. There is some futility here, and I'm just going to call it out. And I realize that he may not have lived in an era where dogs were often walked on leashes, but I think that picture works well for it, where he's going, oh, hold on a second. You ever seen somebody who's walking a dog and the joke gets made, who's walking who? I think basically Solomon's going, I think for so many of us, the dog of work is walking us. Yeah? The work is the one leading the way, not you leading it. It's a vapor that you've tried to use to create meaning in your life. And the toil that you've been chasing after, it comes from this idea that this is where you will find purpose and joy in your life and fulfillment in your life. And he's saying that that's letting the wrong one lead. It's easy to take something that God created as good in Eden and yet make it something where it's all of a sudden too big. It's out of proportion. It's in the wrong place in your life. So the preacher is going to right the ship as he went through all those things. And so here's the one thing. Again, we're going to talk about work in more redemptive ways in the series ahead, but today we're basically just going, okay, the preacher's trying to make sure we realize that if we have work as the thing leading us, as our main thing, it's not going to work. So here's the one thing I hope you get from today. While we were meant to work from meaningfulness, we often end up working for meaningfulness. And for various reasons, which we've already just talked about, that doesn't work because it's meaningless. Again, we talked about how, these different things, they make it so that the work that you could toil and toil and toil after is just a chasing after a wind. Like you're literally running down a hill trying to grab at the wind to stop it from going where it's going, and it's not going to work. So the question then becomes, what does working from meaningfulness look like? Like, what does it look like instead of for you to do the work that you are still called to do, still gifted to do, still equipped and commissioned by your Heavenly Father to do? What does it look like to do that from a place of meaningfulness rather than for? How would you determining if it weren't your meaning coming from the work itself, but was being poured into the work? And this is me asking you questions that honestly I want you to ask yourself, because I don't have easy answers for you. But the question gets to being, how is it that you could approach your work in a way? Because I think a lot of us would say, if we're trying to be spiritual, or if we really have this as our view, which hopefully we do, that the work that we do is meant to be in order to glorify God, ultimately. Yes? Okay, generally, we want to work in order to glorify God. That may be the right answer, and it is. But it's not the only answer that remains after we go ahead and realize that all the meaninglessness of work. The preacher's going to touch on some other things other than work that we would chase after, and that's going to be actually in our message next week. We have an incredible guest speaker talking about chapter 2 when he goes through and talks about him basically sampling at the buffet of all the other things the world has to offer. Pleasure, relationships, because there's kids in the room, relationships and all kinds of like stuff, and he's going to get into that. But work really is one of those things that can be big as far as whether it's something that we've established as this is where my meaning is going to come from. How do we make sure then that the work that we're doing isn't walking us, but that we're walking it? Is it possible that some of the meaningless points that the preacher brought up that we talked about today, we either are offended or hurt or saddened by, or that we, like almost like an allergic reaction, we want to just kind of immediately go, I don't want to think of that, because that reality of work, we haven't really wrestled with it into a way to go ahead and say, you know what, I might work, because y'all, I got to be a part of starting this church. This has been a cool thing for me. 10 years ago, God called me to plant this church, and it's been a wild ride. Do you know how many churches have closed in the last 2,000 years? A lot! Like not even the last 5 years with COVID and all that. Those numbers are crazy. But when you realize that oh man, I got to be a part of starting a church, and God, the church never fails. Big C Church. 2,000 years in all different places around the world and continuing to grow, the church never fails. But sometimes a body stops being this body and starts being... So why did I bother even writing a sermon this week? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. Why are we working? What is the reason for why we're doing it? Am I willing to acknowledge these things of the fleeting nature of the work that I'm doing? The fact that it's temporal. The fact that if I'm not careful, I'm going to be working at a competition. And as we ask these questions, as we wrestle with these things, it really helps to actually refine the work that we do. Obviously, he's not getting rid of it, right? He's refining it. How on earth does God expect you to be motivated to work if all of those things were the case? That's a great question for you to ask. How does God expect you to be motivated? How on earth would he want you to go about doing your work, for you to be led by him into the work that he has for you? Because if you do that, and this is where we end today, okay? If you can do whatever work God has called you to in this season for the glory of God, then you know what's great about that? You could lose your job. You could get your job changed unexpectedly and not really with what you wanted it to be. You could have an injury happen in your life that you didn't obviously choose, that totally makes it so you can't do what you were able to do before. And you did not in that moment, although that is a hardship that we're not diminishing by saying this, you didn't just lose the meaning of your life. The preacher is basically loving us enough to go ahead and say, hold on a second. There are way too many of us that if that were to happen, we got the injury, we lost the job, whatever, we wouldn't know what life is anymore. He's saying, then you were grabbing a vapor. And instead, that question I started off with at the beginning, why do you work? He's going to answer it in the weeks ahead, so you just have to come back in the weeks ahead. But he's basically going to say, the answer shouldn't be, because I have to, because that's my lot in life, and there's no other way of doing it, and I got to earn money and chase after this and chase after that. He's going to say, glorifying God is the end result. Make sure that you're walking the dog's not walking you. Make sure that you recognize all the meaningless parts of what work could be if it was your main way of finding meaning, and instead go, it's not where I find my meaning. I'm not trying to get meaning from my work. I have meaning because back before we even worked, God created us in his image. I'm a son or a daughter of the King. I work from that place of meaning. And so that's the good thing. Whatever God decides to do with it all that I do, cool. Yeah? And that's one of the most freeing places for you to be. That you work hard and you enjoy it, and then at the end of the day, you just kind of go, well, I did what I could. And you rest in the finished work of Jesus. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you have called and equipped us to do work, that we are not in this world in a place where there is nothing for us to do. I mean, in some ways, God, honestly, it would be nice to just sometimes have a break. So thank you for Sabbath. Thank you that you also, in giving us work, you gave us a system for rest so that we can grab the hammock and we can kick up our feet at times in a rhythm where it's that mixed with work. God, thank you that you've given us work to do in this world that you created, that you actually empower us in your domain to do things. And God, in this moment right now, I imagine some of us in the room, we're doing a work right now that maybe isn't, it's not the job that we're most excited about. I'm just confident there are some people in the room right now that their work is not a place of joy, it's a place of frustration. There are some of us in the room, I'm sure, work is a place of stress, and we're grinding hard, just like the author that we read today talks about. Vexation, sleepless nights. There's a lot of us pouring ourselves into it. And maybe for some of us, today's message was a perfect moment for us to be in this room, in this moment, because we are feeling like, what is the point? And maybe, Lord, there's some refining that you want to do in any of our hearts when it comes to work. Because it's not nothing. It is a big deal in our lives. But it's also not everything. It's not sufficient for us to find meaning in when it's just, at the end of the day, really just a vapor. So Jesus, we look to you once more, knowing that you and the work that you did has redeemed, and you are constantly redeeming the work that we do. So we submit ourselves to you and your leadership again. God, knowing that in that submission to you and to your will and to your plans, we do get to work. We get to do things that matter, but also it's from that place of resting in our identity in Christ. God, thank you for the freedom that we have, that we can live that way. Would you today, Lord, I'm just praying for every brother and sister in the room today. Would you refine us? Would you help us to see where there's areas that we need to shift the way that we've been thinking? Would we ask the difficult questions of ourselves and invite the Holy Spirit to ask those questions so that we work better and healthier than we ever have before? For your glory and in your name, amen.